I guess now let's talk a bit more about your undercover work and your work with white supremacists. You were interviewed in the for Brennan, and I read that interview about your experience seeing white supremacist groups recruit non-white people, particularly the focus was Latino white supremacists, because right now, Enrique Tarrio of the Proud Boys was a Cuban American. Nick Fuentes is an open Nazi. Even the neo-Nazi shooter in Texas was of Hispanic descent, and I think that a lot of people feel that that's an incompatible perspective, but
inconsistency,
right? But in fact, it's clearly a concerted effort by the groups in order to launder their agenda. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure, and I think it's really important to recognize, as they do, that race is a social construct, and who is considered white can vary over time. And particularly with Hispanics, a lot of the white supremacist ideology suggests that it's an ancestry in Western Europe that makes you white. And so many Hispanics have ancestral connections back to Spain. So if somebody had a Spanish surname, they could just say, "Oh, I'm not Latin American.
Right.
My ancestry traces back to Spain, which is in Europe, which makes me white." And there really wasn't a lot of investigation. If somebody claimed that, okay, you're in. And obviously, as white supremacy and far-right militancy merge, there are far-right governments all over the world, and there are ethno-nationalist groups all over the world that have different races and are focusing on a different ethnicity that are like-minded with white supremacists, so tend to work in concert with them. But and also human nature is just odd. Sometimes people identify with a group that outwardly hates them, and because race is a social construct, sometimes it's just trying to associate with power. So if white people are the group in power in a particular country, and I'm not white, I might want to assist them just for the short-term protection that gives me, hoping that things will change before the race war starts that they're trying to start. So there have always been people with Jewish backgrounds, people with multiracial backgrounds who've been part of these movements.
Yeah, and I think people think of the Chappelle skit of Clayton Bigsby, right, of the black white supremacist, but it really is obviously more complex than that. Would you say it's this desire to be close to a sense of power that draws from their end people into it? I mean, based on your undercover work, what did you see was really the hook for non-white people to be associated with something like this?
Well, really the hook for all of them, for the groups that I was infiltrating, the part of the white supremacist movement that was openly participating in criminality and violence, a lot of them were just criminals.
Right.
And, there aren't too many, if you try to join some local social club and tell them about your love of bomb making, you're probably not going to be very popular. But if you find this group, you'll be very popular, and they'll let help you expand your interest in bomb making. So there were a lot of people who really weren't that interested in reading Mein Kampf, but were interested in committing violence, and that's what attracted them to the movement. So, like any other group, you wouldn't expect some 19 or 20-year-old Marine to understand the geopolitics of whatever invasion or police action that they're involved in. they're more mission oriented. And when one of my cases, tracing who were engaging in illegal weapons trafficking, they took me to Asian arms dealers, and they wouldn't say, "Oh, well, that violates my ideological goals to actively engage with other racial groups." That's not how it works. They have guns. We want guns. We're going to get them.
Right. I mean, and how does this recruitment effort fit into broader, like, the branding of these groups? Because I mean, what's the group that advertised itself as a drinking club? Is it the Proud Boys?
Oh, right, the Proud Boys.
It's the Proud Boys. Yeah.
Right, and a lot of groups, particularly the far right militias, try to have a more palatable public positioning. So they'll claim not to be white supremacists, and the Proud Boys were very much practiced in that and called themselves instead Western chauvinists, which is kind of just a semantic trick, right? They're talking about the supremacy of Western Europe, which is white. Obviously they could point to individual members who might not fit the public perception of who is white, but their activity was hand in glove with other white supremacist groups when they were committing crimes. So it was a distinction without a difference. And there have always been groups like that. And, particularly as the far right movement has received more public attention and is trying to expand its reach, one of the popular T-shirts is Pinochet did nothing wrong, embracing South American fascism and ethno-nationalism that helps them find partners in their efforts to move their agenda forward.
I mean, and it fits very nicely, unfortunately, with the global fascism effort that we're seeing, whether it be Bolsonaro in Brazil, whether it be Erdogan in Turkey, whether it be what's the guy of Hungary? Orban in Hungary. There is a message discipline, but with those governments, and you'll hear you heard the same stuff that Trump was saying coming out of Bolsonaro's mouth, essentially, and like Tucker Carlson's going to Hungary to do these interviews, and the internationalism is also a part of, I would imagine, the strategy of this.
Exactly, and always has been, right? If you go back to the original Nazis, and it always frustrates me when you hear FBI management talk about white supremacy as domestic violent extremism because it's a domestic ideology. We didn't invent Nazis.
Yeah,
right? It's always been an international ideology and international in action as well. And the original Nazi Germany was allied with the Axis power, which included Japan, and had positive relationships with some Arab countries. So it's a misinterpretation of both history and their ideology that would make somebody believe that this is a problem that is domestic in nature. It only occurs in the United States. And it's fascinating when I mentioned the base cases. One of the individuals arrested was a Canadian military deserter who had come across the border to participate in the plot, and an FBI official identified him as an example of international domestic terrorism, which
right.
kind of shows how it's a very confused lexicon.
Yeah, it should be contradictory, but it's just like, I mean, lastly here, you talked about in your interview how this effort to brand themselves and have non-white people in their ranks this is a part of their, I think, public-facing brand, but also a way for them to skirt under some classifications made by federal law enforcement when it comes to domestic terrorism and white supremacist violence. Can you flesh that out a little bit for our listeners?
Sure. And just quickly, as the Latino population of the United States grows, the distribution of power will change, and who will be considered white will expand. And of course, there are already many ethnicity or Hispanic is an ethnicity, not a race, and there are white Hispanics and black Hispanics and Asian Hispanics. But who the movement considers white will expand as well to incorporate them, because they need numbers and they need supporters. So they will recruit in communities that are achieving more equity in the society. Because I think the law enforcement agencies still misunderstand how the ideology works in practice with the white supremacists, the violent white supremacists and far-right militants. It's easy for them to mistake what is happening and overlook somebody because they don't fit their idea of what these groups do rather than the reality of what they do.
Mike German, fellow with the Brennan Center for Justice's Liberty and National Security Program. You can pick up his book, Disrupt, Discredit, and Divide: How the New FBI Damages Democracy, and be on the lookout for his next book coming next year. Thanks so much, Mike, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Thank you.